Hey everyone, I'm Robbie Cornthwaite.
I'm Daniel Mullen.
I'm Angelo Costanzo.
I'm Marco Flores.
I'm Marcelo Garuska.
I'm Ian Fife.
This is Casio, and you're watching.
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 And you are watching
Pure Bred Reds, Adelaide United Fan TV.
Are you sure?
I'm trying to do my maths.
4-2. He wins it for us. John.
Here's Aloisi for a place in the
You
World
win it
Cup.
for us.
He scored! Australia have done it!
John! Come on!
John Aloisi, the Confederations Cup hero, has done it in the biggest game of all.
Come on, Australia! Johnny Warren!
It's vital. Every national league in the world is a production line of players for the national team, ultimately. But also, it's there for the enjoyment of the fans. So we've created a very good league in the space of just over a decade. Yeah, there's still work to be done, but it gives players in Australia a pathway at home, which they perhaps didn't have, certainly at a professional level, before.
It's going to be Isaias! Oh! Isaias, the Spaniard! Sí, senor! Sí! 2 goals to the good Adelaide!
My dream for Australian football is for it to fulfil its potential, pure and simple. It doesn't have to be the #1 sport in Australia or even the #2. I don't care about any of that. I just want it to fulfil its potential.
The moment. Bresciano, similar sort of delivery. Kale went for it, couldn't reach it. Back in by Franic. And Kale goes for the spectacular. What about that? What about that? Oh, Timmy Kale. He's an absolute star. And in the really big games, you need your really big players. And that is a really big goal. And something very spectacular. Just brilliant.
Hello and welcome to the Pure Bred Reds Adelaide United Fan TV. I'm your host Ellis Gelios, coming to you with a preview of our round 1 game, and I'm absolutely delighted to announce that I'm joined by a man who really needs no introduction. He's been the voice of Australian football for the best part of the last 15 years across SBS, Fox Sports and various other platforms. I speak, of course, of the highly popular, highly charismatic Simon Hill. Simon, welcome to the show.
Good to be with you, Ellis. How are you?
Really well, thank you. I find it almost impossible to avoid asking you a very open-ended question from the off, which is that of the last 12 months, our game here in Australia. What have you made of it all?
God, this is going to be a long podcast. Look, as ever with football in Australia, things are up in the air, aren't they? We've got a TV deal that runs out in 6 months, virtually to the day. The financial aspect of that has been halved. We're waiting on independence. We're waiting on investments. We're waiting for the great leap forward, as Mao Zedong said many years ago. Probably paraphrasing him there. So I think we're in a transitional phase, but we seem to have been in a transitional phase for many, many years, and it's frustrating waiting. But, I still have faith in the game in this country. As I've said on many occasions, I think really we've only just begun to scratch the surface of its huge potential, but it's realising that potential that's the tricky bit, and we seem a bit stuck at the moment. Let's hope that resolves itself over the next 6 months. And obviously coronavirus has not helped, but that's the same in many aspects of life. But, these problems were evident before COVID struck. So we need to get them resolved, but it's easy for me to say that.
Can't echo your thoughts enough there, Simon. Simon Hill, the host of the podcast, Shim, Spider, and so much more. Check it out from where you get all your podcasts. Simon, we're going to take a look at previewing our clash against Western United Monday night. It, of course, now will be the opener to this A-League season for 2020-21. And then after our preview, we're going to get into a little bit of a biographical, find out a little bit more about the great man that is Simon Hill. So the game tomorrow night, that's Monday, will be kicking off 6:35 South Australian time. As always, you can catch all the action on Fox Sports and the KO Sports app. Regarding our squad Surprisingly, Simon, the two most recently signed stars in Tommy Urich and Javi Lopez have been named. The only unavailable players for Adelaide United, Ryan Kiddo, Yared Abichu and Al Hassan Toure, who still has that lingering ankle problem. So straight off the bat, Simon, I have to ask you your thoughts on the James Tracy saga and whether this has further strengthened your opinion on the fact that the A-League's lack of a transfer system in place at the moment is seriously damaging our domestic products.
Yes, is a very simple answer. Look, unfortunately, because of the lack of a transfer system, the players have an awful lot of power. You know, if they don't want to play for a club, or if there is, a window of opportunity for them to move elsewhere, they can dig their heels in. I'm not saying this has been the case necessarily with James. I don't know the ins and outs of that discussion, although I have read, as I'm sure everybody else has, Bruce Jittay's comments and James's comments. You know, it's he said, she said, really. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, he was under contract, and in every other walk of footballing life, players come and go. You know, they sign for clubs and then they leave clubs, and this is the way of the football world. I'm not saying it's right, but what would have been better in this situation, if James wanted to go and Adelaide, were prepared to let him go, I mean, in the end, they probably had no choice, then at least if you have a transfer system in place, the buying club or the club that the player is going to has to pay a fee. And I think that's only just and fair. But as things stand at the moment, we don't have that. We're going to have it at some point in the future. I was a part of a webinar series that the FFA put together on the transfer system. When it's going to come in, I don't know, but it needs to be sooner rather than later, and not just between A-League clubs as well. You know, we're talking about grassroots clubs, NPL clubs that develop talent and are due recognition for that work that they put in terms of, fiscal reward. That's what makes the football economy tick the world over, and we just don't have it now. I understand why we didn't have it in the first place. That they were trying to make sure that A-League clubs in the interim, in the startup phase, survived, and I get that. But we should have moved past that a long time ago. But again, it goes back to your opening question: where are we at as a game? Well, not where we should be is the answer, and this is just another small example of it.
Absolutely, and if people want to hear more about what the enemy has to say about that, you can access that in Simon's most recent episode on Shim, Spider and so much more. Wide-ranging interview that you had there with Carl Robinson, who seemed very coy on all matters regarding his most recent signings, didn't seem to hint at the fact that there was anything untoward regarding the business that went on there. So by all means, head over there and check that out.
Ellis, sorry, just to interrupt there. And, Carl legally is right, because, the way things stand, he is within his rights to sign James Tracy and Bernie Abini. But morally, I think the game needs to move past that and set up this transfer system. And then we all know where we stand. Sorry.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said. So, Simon, let's get into the preview. How do you assess the pre-seasons of both clubs leading into the A-League's opener tomorrow evening regarding their form and transfers? We know all about the long list of key departures at Adelaide, which is much unlike the goings-on at Western United. Though the Reds have strengthened their squad in more recent times with, as we know, the acquisitions of Javi Lopez and Tommy Urich. Meanwhile, Western United have brought in Lachlan Wales, Victor Sanchez and South Australian Ayon Majok. Both sides have had fairly comprehensive pre-seasons, beating local teams respectively. How do you sort of weigh it all up, both of their pre-seasons, Simon?
Well, as ever with A-League clubs, when we head into a new campaign, it's very difficult to know because of the salary cap mechanism. You can look at certain club squads and think they're going to go okay this season, and the opposites may turn out to be true. I remember 12 months ago, Marco Kurtz signing on at Melbourne Victory, and you thought, okay, here's a guy who'll get things organised, given his track record at Adelaide United, and his signings looked relatively decent on paper. You thought that they would, as a minimum, make the six. didn't happen. And before the end of the season, Kurtz was gone. So it's hard to know specifically. From Adelaide's point of view, you're right that they've lost a lot of key players. One of the keys for me, and I don't wish to try and put a huge amount of responsibility on his shoulders, but Paul Izzo has been very, very good between the posts for Adelaide for the last few seasons. Now he's rightly got his opportunity to go overseas, and James Delianov has been brought in. Now James doesn't have a lot of A-League experience. He's a very promising goalkeeper. Can he accept that responsibility? We've seen it with young kids before, particularly at the Reds with, the Toure kids and Luis D'Arrigo and various others. So I hope he can do the job for them. That's a question mark for me. You mentioned the new signings. I think one of the others that you missed out was George Timoteu, who's come in from Germany. I think he was with Schalke. Now he's a kid that's had a big load of potential for many years. Is this his stage to make that breakthrough? And if he does, where does that leave either Michael Jakobsen or Jordan Elsey in that back line? So I think there's lots to look forward to for the Reds. Tommy Juric is a proven goal scorer at A-League level, but is he fit? Is he in the right mindset? Can Lopez, adapt quickly enough to the A-League? They're all questions that will be answered over the coming weeks and months. But I think overall, Adelaide is set to go okay. I think there should be enough goals in the team, despite the loss of Riley McGree, which is massive for me. But I think as a bare minimum, Adelaide should be in the 6.
Beautiful. James Delianov is arguably Western United's most notable departure behind Panagiotis Kone. He's only got one game of senior A-League experience under his belt. It looks as though the young Socceroo shot stopper will have a big Carl Beard's first choice between the sticks. He was very firm in stating that opinion at the recent fans forum held just last week, that he would start for us pending his fit. Surely there's no greater way for Delianov to kickstart a promising career other than by debuting against his former club.
Yeah, although he obviously struggled for first-team opportunities at Western United, but this is now his big opportunity. Obviously, they've got Dakota Oxenham as well, who's still there, but he's also, got minimal A-League experience. So you would imagine Delianov will be between the posts. And again, it's up to him to take that opportunity. We've been crying out for young kids to get a go in the A-League. James is one of those. He's just back from a very serious injury, which ruled him out for most of the season. So hopefully he's fully recovered from that. But you're right. It's a great place for him to start and maybe show his former club that they were wrong to let him go if they had any choice in that matter. And it'll be a tough game. Western United have got some quality players, Berisha and Diamante being the two key. Max Burgess has stayed for now at Western United. So, that front three were pretty potent last season. They haven't had too many other changes in or out, but they'll be tough to beat. It's a hard trip to go to Geelong. But hopefully for your sake, you Reds, they do the job.
Yeah, we only need to look as far back as 2 weeks before the A-League shut down to last season when Western United thumped Adelaide 6-1 at Cooper Stadium. A very, very difficult afternoon to endure that one was. Now, Simon, you've been around the grounds as much as anyone. This may come across as trivial, but the two Spaniards entering the league this season, Javi Lopez at Adelaide and his good friend Victor Sanchez at Western United, and I should mention there are more, some have signed at Western Sydney. But these two in particular, is there any danger that there may have been shared club intel between both of these players as they both look to acclimatise and settle down under, whilst no doubt having not separated their bond as compatriots?
That's a very interesting question. I doubt that very much, to be honest. I think, professionals, when they're building up to a new season, I remember, I think Steve Corica and is it Tony Popovich or one of his good mates, when they sort of clashed heads in the A-League, and they said, no, it was Ufuk Talay, because of course Talay was Corica's number 2 at Sydney, and they're great mates, but they didn't speak in the week building up to the game between the two, and that's right. You've got to be professional on the day. I think that'll be fine. Don't worry.
Beautiful player with a straight bat. Some may say Mark Rudin overachieved drastically last season at a start-up club. Is it fair to suggest there'll be significantly greater expectations placed upon him this season, especially after managing to avoid losing most of his best players?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I think in some ways Roods benefits from the fact that he got his team to the finals last year, and don't forget he got Wellington to the finals the year before as well. But also, they're still very much in the start-up phase as a club, Western United. They're not helped by the fact that they're playing at Geelong, they're playing at Ballarat, they're taking a few games, I see, to Amy Park this year as well. Quite why they're not going to play at the logical stadium, for me, which is Knight Stadium, where there's politics between the two, I don't know. But for me, whilst they're waiting for that new stadium to be built, that's the perfect place. It's in the right geographical location. It's the right size. With a bit of investment, it could benefit both clubs. But I mean, goodness knows why they haven't taken that option. To play at that big stadium at Geelong, I mean, it's a wonderful venue, but it's not a football venue. Doesn't help the players, I don't think. So, look, I don't know whether there's a huge amount of expectation on Roots. With respect to Western United, they're not, at least not yet, they're not a Melbourne Victory, they're not a Western Sydney Wanderers, they're not a Sydney FC, they're not even a Melbourne City. So I think expectations are, I wouldn't say that they're low. They'll want to get to the finals and probably improve upon last year. But you're not going to get this massive groundswell of opinion if they lose 2 or 3 in the same way that a Wanderers or a Victory or a Sydney would. So I think he'll be left to go about his business. And look, Roods is a good coach. I worked with Mark for quite a few years during his television days and mine. And he knows the game back to front. He's managed some pretty big personalities at Western United and got the best out of them last year. I think he'll probably do the same again. And provided, my only question mark against Western United is they've got a lot of players in the older age bracket, and they are another year older. Barisha's ticking on for 36, Diamante on for 38, Durante, similar sort of age group. So those key players are getting towards the end of their careers. Sometimes you can go on a season too long. I'm not saying that's the case with those 3, but maybe that's a slight question mark. But overall, I think they'll be okay. I think they'll be in the 6.
Yeah, can't seem to disagree there at all. Let's focus on us, Simon. So you saw what Carl Beard managed to pull off back in the hub at the end of last season after coming from such a low base when the league had shut down in March and Gertie and Babake was moved on. After so many key departures now, do you think he has it in him to guide Adelaide to at least a finals finish this season? I know you did say off the top there that you think Adelaide should aim for the 6. Do you think Carl can do it?
Yeah, I do. And the reasons for that, partly is recruitment, as we've already outlined. I think he's managed to replace, at least on paper, and that's all we've got to go on at the moment, those key departures relatively well. I think Carl benefits from the fact that he knows the club, he knows the city, he knows the players, he knows the mentality, he knows what is expected of him in South Australia. And I think he's sort of brought back already, and we saw this by the run they went on towards the back end of last season, that little bit of local identity and that back to basics approach, really. They're much more difficult to beat. Now, that's not to say that everything that happened under Hirsch and Babake was wrong. I mean, he won the FFA Cup for a start, and for a while he had them purring, but for whatever reason...
years ago, Simon.
It does, doesn't it? But they sort of went off the rails a little bit for some unknown reason, and it didn't seem to be a particularly happy camp towards the end of the Dutchman's reign. Now, I think Carl has sort of galvanised the group. He's got Eugene Galekovic alongside him and others with that local DNA, and I think that's important in a place like South Australia. You are pretty parochial down there, and you're proud of your state and your club and your colours, and I think Carl sort of understands all that. So, look, I'm not saying Adelaide are going to win the thing. I don't necessarily think they will, but I think finals football as a bare minimum is a very, very realistic target.
Beautiful. So your prediction for this one, Simon, who comes out on top?
I'm probably going to go for it. I know this is going to sound like I've got splinters in my backside, but I'll probably go for a draw to start off with. What I will say is these games, and I covered a couple of these last season between these two clubs, and they're very high-scoring affairs. So
yes.
Hopefully it'll be the same. I think there was one I did at, was it Whitnoble?
4-3, I think, yeah.
4-3, and you mentioned the 6-1 or whatever it was earlier on. So hopefully there'll be a few goals, but I just got a feeling it might end up in a draw, this one.
No worries. So let's just briefly jump into discussing the position the A-League currently finds itself in. You thrash this topic out routinely on your weekly podcast, Shim, Spider, and so much more. I guess it's fair to say our game is on some shaky ground at the moment, Simon. Most pressing is what will become of the next TV rights deal and whether your former employers, Fox Sports, will re-enter negotiations. Frankly, there's no one better to ask as to what the delivery of the league to consumers should look like in the future and who you potentially see taking it on if it isn't to be Fox Sports.
Well, I mean, the honest answer is I don't know at the moment. And this is why it's incumbent upon the clubs and the players to provide a good product over the next 6 months. We're into the last phase now of the 1 year extension. Already, in my opinion, we've wasted 6 months. We're still the league is still not independent for some unknown reason. Although we're now shifting the language over to we are functionally independent, but if not literally independent. Well, please. Clearly the league is still under the auspices of the FFA. Until that changes, it appears the clubs are, holding back on what they intend to do. I hope they've got a plan. They say they do. But time's running short. So all the players and the clubs can do is provide a good product and try to entertain people over the next 6 months. As to where it goes, there's been a lot of talk of FFA TV or an OTT platform, the club's going it alone. I still hope that that's the case. I think it's time to take ownership of our own destiny. I think, where it's at the moment, I can't see it growing beyond where it's currently at because the current broadcaster has its eggs in different baskets. And look, that's their prerogative as a business. But I don't think football is a priority for them. Obviously, there might be other players in the market. I know a lot of people have talked about Optus. I don't know where that's at, whether they have an interest. Clearly, they're a football broadcaster. But broadcasting football from overseas is very different to paying and producing it yourself here in Australia, which, I know from my experience is a very costly business. Maybe the clubs can do that themselves. But to do that, they need investment, and to get investment, they keep saying they need independence. So we're in this circular argument, which is why we need a circuit breaker, and things need to change very, very quickly over the next few months. Look, maybe Fox Sports will come back to the table, but how much will they offer? Will it be the same? Will it be more? Could it be less? I think they're all possibilities, but I think football needs to break out of that box that it's in at the moment and explore something new, and take charge of its own destiny. We're already seeing that we're shifting towards winter, and I know there's a lot of consternation about that, and I understand it. Or what are we going to do about publicity with the other codes? Well, what publicity do we get these days anyway? Very little. Right. So I think we've got to do, what's best for our sport and tailor it towards what the fans of our sport want, not fans of other sports or broadcasters who favour other sports want. So I agree with that switch. I just hope that football is strong enough to be able to grab control of its own destiny and say, no, we don't care what you want. This is where we're going as a sport. And I think if they do that, the football community will support them. But we're running out of time.
Needs to be more people singing from your song sheet, Simon. We'll finish our previous segment just talking about the football. So you did mention you don't fancy Adelaide United's championship prospects so much this season. I will ask you who you do fancy. Therefore, there are a lot of people talking about the fact that the diminished salary cap may well mean that we don't get Sydney FC dominating early on and thus potentially a much more exciting regular round season this time round. How do you see it panning out, just briefly?
Well, I think that there are probably going to be, several teams in contention. It might be right to say that Sydney will be drawn back to the pack, but, aside of Adam Lafondra, who they've lost, and I'm pretty sure they'll replace at some point, the squad has remained largely the same. They've still got a lot of know-how. They've won titles on a very regular basis over the last 4 to 5 seasons. They know how to win, which a lot of other clubs don't at the moment. So I think Sydney FC will be up there. I'm not saying they're going to become the first club to win 3 in a row, although it's a big possibility. I think Melbourne City will be up there. Again, the unknown is whether Paddy Kisnorbo is the right choice. He's had a very good apprenticeship under Eric Mombert. Again, their squad looks very strong, very settled. You'd expect improvements from the likes of Western Sydney Wanderers and Melbourne Victory. Can they improve enough to put pressure on those top 2? I'm not sure. I still think that Sydney FC and Melbourne City, the 2 grand finalists from last season, on paper, and that's all we've got to go on at the moment, they're the 2 strongest clubs.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong, unfortunately, for us Adelaide United fans. Simon, that does us for our preview. We're going to jump into a bit of a biographical here. So let's take it all the way back to the beginning of our affinity with you as Australian football fans. Born in Manchester and a proud Manchester City fan, as you are displaying here today. After having worked across various mediums with the BBC, an offer right out of left field came your way from SBS in the mid-2000s. Have you heard much about the country that you go on to proudly call your home for what is now approaching 2 decades? And was it a big leap of faith to move here at the time? We should just note, prior to your arrival, the domestic game here was in tatters, obviously the disbanded old National Soccer League. And our national team hadn't qualified for a World Cup in over 30 years. So you must have been quite intrigued with the prospect of coming down under.
Yeah, it seems an awful long time ago now. I'd only ever been to Australia for 5 days on holiday, which strangely enough was the year before in 2002. It all came about, and I've told this story quite a few times, an old BBC colleague of mine who was from Manchester, Rob Minshall, Man City fan like me, and we'd been to watch a lot of City games whilst he was in the UK, and he'd emigrated out to Australia quite a few years before I did, and I came over to see him on holiday in 2002 on the back end of going to the World Cup in Japan and Korea, where I went to watch a few games as a fan. I'd been made redundant from my previous job with ITV. The channel, unfortunately, had collapsed financially. So I was sort of looking for work, and I was freelancing, and I actually had an offer to join Sky Sports in the UK in late 2002. But when I came out to see Rob in that winter of 2002, he said, "Oh, there's a job going here as a commentator for SBS Television," and I said, "Okay." He said, "No, you'd be perfect for it." And I said, "Well, why would they want me? They don't know who I am, and I live on the other side of the world." No, you should. Anyway, look, he went on about it for so long that in the end, more to shut him up than anything else, I said, "Look, okay, I'll send in a CV and a show reel," and and to my astonishment, Ken Shipp at SBS got back to me within a couple of weeks and said, "Look, we're very interested. Would you be keen to come to Australia?" So I was like, "Well, wow, why not?" So then I had a big choice to make. Did I accept the offer from Sky Sports, which was and still is, the premier broadcaster of football in the UK, or do I take, this leap of faith and go to the other side of the earth? And look, at the time I was 34, 35. I wasn't married, didn't have any kids, and I'd had the opportunity to move overseas before I'd gone to ITV to join ESPN in Singapore, and I'd sort of turned that down to stay with ITV. So I thought I'd always wanted to live overseas, and I thought, well, maybe this is my last opportunity. So I thought I'd give it a go. And here I am, 18 years later, still here. It was only supposed to be for 2 or 3 years, but anyway, it worked out okay, I think.
Everything happens for a reason, Simon. If someone had told you when you first arrived that within a decade of you being here covering the game, we would have qualified for 3 World Cups, with an Asian Cup under our belt and a thriving domestic competition with a continental champion among us in Western Sydney, you probably wouldn't have believed them. These, among many more recollections, are just mere snapshots of the catalogue of memorable occasions that you've covered as a commentator and pundit since being here. Talk us through your favourite memories, as we've all ridden the wave with you.
Oh, wow, there's a lot. Look, I know a lot of people's favourite memory is the Uruguay game. As I've said many times before, it's not necessarily mine because it was a very tough night in the commentary box. I actually prefer the World Cup in Germany 2006. That was a terrific experience, and obviously a huge honour and a privilege to be able to call Australia's first goal and first win at a World Cup finals. Ditto the Asian Cup in 2015. Tremendous emotional experience to be able to call Australia winning a major trophy, but there have been many others, grand finals and big blues and derbies and the interstate rivalry between Victory and Adelaide. That day in 2016 with 50,000 at Adelaide Oval, trips overseas to places I've never even heard of like Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. It's been a wonderful ride, and obviously at the moment I'm not involved with covering the A-League, which I'm disappointed about, and hopefully that's not the end of my involvement with the competition of football in Australia. It might be, I don't know, but if it is to end, then I can have no complaints really. I had a terrific experience and was very fortunate really to arrive at a time, and I didn't know this when I arrived in Australia, that the game was just about to take off. So
Absolutely.
My career's sort of ridden the wave of that, and I've been very, very fortunate to do so.
Yeah, and how can we forget Senor C? And also, I just want to throw in the 2008 Asian Champions League run, Simon. Very much uncharted waters at the time. You must have found that very exciting, being at the forefront.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't actually call that final. I think that was Mike Cockrell who called that two-legged final.
I think you'd done a fair of the group stage game, so.
Yeah, I did. I remember being, I remember the first game. In fact, it didn't involve Adelaide. The very first Champions League game I called was Melbourne Victory and... it might have been a Korean team, John Book Motors, I think, at the old Telstra Dome. And there were 26,000 there that night. I remember thinking, wow, this is so exciting. His Australian clubs taking part on the Asian stage, and we thought it was going to be this, great adventure. And in the early years, it was, obviously, with the Reds getting to the final. Remember it vividly, that two-legged tie against Canberra, and then 6 years later, the Wanderers winning it. Unfortunately, what's happened since, it's not quite been the same. But, yeah, hopefully those days will come back again. It is still our future, Asia. And, when you look back on all the things that football in Australia has achieved over the last decade and a half, for me, that's still the most important one, that we now have a future as a part of a continent that gives us, this regular international club football as well as international national team competition. So, it's been a fantastic development. And, as mentioned, I've managed to go on so many of those trips with the national team and on occasion the club teams overseas. And, that's a big part of what football is about for me. It's that international language that we all share. It's brilliant.
Simon, you've travelled far and wide to call games, as we've just touched on, in the Asian Champions League, the Asian Cup, international friendlies, international tournaments, and of course World Cups. Are there any trips that have stood out for you across the overall journey for one reason or another?
Many. For various reasons. I mentioned Kyrgyzstan. That was just terrific. I remember on the night of the game in Bishkek, a very rickety old stadium, and our commentary, I won't call it a booth because it was out in the open. Our commentary position was based upon two bits of balsa wood that was wedged between two banks of seating. And I remember the producer, who was a Russian guy who spoke very broken English, said to us, do you move around when you commentate? And I said, not really. We tend to sit still. And he said, okay, that's good, because this wood is not very safe. So if you jump about, you'll fall through the seats. So me and Andy Harper sat stock still for the entire 90 minutes. And the fans, but this was the biggest game in their history. The fans poured in over the walls. They weren't supposed to, but they were so desperate to see their team. So they were pouring in like ants. Brilliant atmosphere, bumpy pitch, and this backdrop of the Alatu mountain range covered in snow at the back. And I remember just thinking, wow, this ain't bad for a kid from Salford to be a part of all this. So there was that. There was a trip to Lebanon. Again, I could go through a million stories, to Jordan, Vietnam, trips to World Cups, to Brazil, to South Africa, to Germany, all parts of the globe. Just wonderful wonderful experiences, not just the football, but the life experiences. And that's what football gives you. Why would you want to be involved in any other sport? How boring must it be to be involved in sports where you just go round and round playing Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide for the rest of your existence? Oh, we have the whole smorgasbord of the planet at our disposal, and wherever you go in the world, even if you don't speak the same language, you get out of football and everybody knows what you're talking about. Love it.
I certainly hear there, Simon. Unfortunately, many other sports fans here in Australia will never get out of their bubble. Simon, talk to us about what many would perceive in Australia as your unique support for Manchester City. You followed this club passionately for decades, and you have... Yeah, I say that only because I dare say there's not that many Man City fans in Australia that have been following. You may know better than I do, but I dare say there's not that many that have been following since pre-2008, and I don't want to throw any barbs around. But you've seen them, as an older fan, you've seen them relegated to the third division on one occasion even. So City obviously mean a lot to you. Tell us about your history as a man that has always been sky blue through and through.
Well, my support of Man City is the reason why I'm talking to you now, because without City, I wouldn't be involved in football. It comes from family heritage. Obviously, I'm from Manchester for a start, so geographically they were the closest club. But my dad was and still is at 86 a Man City fan. Still goes to some of the home games, although he's given up his season ticket just in the last 12, 18 months because he struggles to walk to and from the ground these days because he's knocking on a bit. But he's a City fan all his life. My granddad was a City fan all his life. Passed away many years ago now, but and my great-granddad played for Manchester City even before they were known as Manchester City in 1892 when they were Ardwick FC. So this is like a family heirloom, or as we used to say before we won trophies, a family disease that was passed down from generation to generation. I went to my first game when I was 6 years old, April 1974 against Ipswich Town. I was enrolled as a junior blue almost as soon as I knew what football was. Membership number 596, I still remember. So, it's in my DNA really. And as I say, the reason I'm a journalist and a broadcaster and have been involved in football all my life is because I was sort of born into it really. I didn't have any choice, nor did I want any. So I'm very grateful to my dad and his dad and his dad before him for steeping me in that sky blue history.
Yeah, I just really wanted to touch on that because of all the things I've seen that you've done, all the podcasts, all the documentaries you've featured in. It's always sort of mentioned that you are a Man City fan, but no one really ever goes into your history as a Manchester City fan. You did speak once at length about how you recall seeing Manchester City battling it out in League One and how it was also different once upon a time. But I do find it very interesting just to hear the connection that you have, and it is a very strong connection as you've just outlaid there. So Simon, after finishing up with Fox Sports back in July of this year, you've moved into a freelancing space where we've seen your works published across numerous platforms such as the A-League's official website and Optus Sports, where you've been covering the Premier League. You also now host the fabulous weekly podcast, Shim, Spider, and so much more, as we've touched on. And I very much implore all our fans and viewers here to go and check that out because there's not too many podcasts that really delve into as much as you do there with Zelko Kalic and the great Craig Moore. Simon, as well as that, you are now hosting the new quiz show, Game of Two Halves. Before I ask you to tell us more about that, just tell us how it's all travelling collectively and what the future may hold for you given the rather peculiar times we find ourselves in at the moment.
It's a good question. The honest answer is I don't know. At the moment, I take it sort of 1 week or 1 month at a time. I've been fortunate since leaving Fox at the end of June that I've had a reasonable amount of work and certainly financially, enough to keep me going. Some exciting projects that I've been involved in and still involved in. with Game of Two Halves being one of them. Doing some work for Sports Flick as well, calling the UEFA Women's Champions League, and they're a new streaming service which is hoping to grow very much in the new space, which I hope football will take advantage of over the coming weeks and months. And I'm enjoying being a part of all that stuff, writing, as you say, for websites, The Guardian and for Optus and for the A-League website. So there's enough to keep me busy for the time being. At some point, obviously, you got to look, longer term and think, well, am I going to stay freelancing here? Is there a commentary role for me? If not, do I head back to the UK and resume my commentary career over there, or my media career, or do I go do something completely different? And that is a possibility. I'm 53. My parents are knocking on a bit. Once this coronavirus is brought under control back in the UK, it's entirely possible I could head back. I just don't know is the honest answer. So at the moment, I'm just ticking along, earning a bit of money, paying my bills, enjoying having the freedom to have opinions, which I didn't have towards the end of my time with Fox Sports, which was very disappointing. And I think it's important to have those voices for football. We don't have too many of them. So that's one of the reasons we started the podcast in the first place. But as to the long-term future, it's all in the lap of the gods, and we shall see. Whatever the cosmos has in store for me, I'll just have to accept and see where it takes me.
Well, Simon Hill, I have to say, perhaps from a selfish standpoint, I hope coronavirus manages to keep you here a little while longer. But on a serious note, Simon, it's been an absolute privilege to have you on the show. Fascinating talking to you at length like I have today. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for all the work you've done for such a long period of time. Literally a voice that I've grown up with. Your call of the Uruguay game in 2005 was really my introduction into football as a full-time fan, and it's really shaped the course of my life, and I know it has many other people as well that I'm close to, and we really owe you a lot in this country for all your service to the game. So thank you so much for everything, and we continue to look forward to the work that is yet to come that you will author. So Simon Hill, all the very best with all your future endeavours, and you take care and stay safe.
Thanks very much, Ellis. And can I just say, you owe me nothing. Australia's given me so much. Hopefully I gave a bit back, but it's been a privilege to be involved in it. I'm pleased that I played, part in some of those nice memories for you. And thanks very much for having me on your show. Cheers.